Today's video is going to be all about flat locking. That's where you have a ladder stitch on one side, then you have a folded over flattened looper seam on the other side, and this could either be the exterior interior or the exterior interior, depending on whatever look you want. This is done on woven fabric. We're going to be doing it on a variety of fabrics this morning. We're going to start off with some scuba knit. This is medium weight scuba knit, around 265 or 275 grams per square meter. Now, this is how I start most of my serging. I rotate my wheel to get the knife in its highest position, lift up the presser foot, and put my fabric in here as far as into the knife as possible. Lower my presser foot. This gives me the best possible chance of the feed dogs grabbing the fabric. Now, for today we have woolly nylon in the loopers and regular Serger cone thread in the needle. So my settings for this one are 1 for the needle, 5 for the upper, and 6 for the lower looper. The manual calls for slightly different basic settings, but that would be for cone thread. The woolly nylon, you have to adjust it a little bit. Now, since it is woolly nylon, I recommend always starting off by giving a little tug on the chain and keep the constant pressure on there while you're starting your serge until you get into your fabric a little bit. This technique will help keep your machine from ever eating the fabric. I use this technique all the time, and I never, even on the thinnest knit fabrics I have, never have a machine eat the fabric. So let's take a look. And I have the stitch width at about 1, and the differential turned down just a little bit. And then start your serging. Give a little pressure here so you pull the fabric. Not really pull it, but just give it a little tension to start. That'll keep it from getting pulled into the machine. And then when you're finished serging, do not yank it and pull it to the left. Just continue letting it feed out directly to the back. And then trim your chain. And this would be this is set for right needle and the cutting blade as close to possible for the most narrow flat lock this machine can do. And it's a Singer finishing touch. Then when you pull your fabric, it'll fold over to one way. This is the looper side with the folded over fabric over one layer. Then here's the other side, which is the chain stitch, or the ladder stitch. And this stitch is a very stretchy stitch, so like most stitches with the Serger. And that is the most narrow flat lock on this machine. Now we're going to do the same, mostly the same settings, but I'm going to move the knife over to its widest position to give a slightly wider flat lock without having to change the needle. Line up my fabrics, get my knife to its highest position, lift up the presser foot, get my fabric in there, grab my serger tail, follow through, don't pull it to the left, don't yank it. I know a lot of people in most of the instruction books, or most of the instruction videos on YouTube, what people do as soon as they're finished with the fabric stitching, they tend to just yank it hard to the left and pull it this way and pick it up and stretch it. You're going to distort your fabric on the corner here. As you can see, it's almost perfectly square, not distorted at all, because I followed through. But your serger, you don't ever want to yank or pull anything very hard, because there's a couple of stitch fingers down here that could be bent. You might also warp your looper or break your needle or bend your needle. So never yank or pull anything hard on your serger. Just always pull it gently. If it is stuck a little bit, you just wiggle your hand crank forward a little bit, maybe back a little bit to loosen it up. And then this is the slightly wider, and it operates the same. You pull your fabric, it'll fold over to one side. Then you go over to the front and you have your slightly wider ladder stitch. Now if you switched over the needle to the left needle position, you'd add another 2 millimeters to this. So you'd have approximately a 4 millimeter wide flat lock with the blade all the way in, and approximately a 6 millimeter wide, more like a 5.5 millimeter wide, with it all the way to the right as the widest. But we're going to leave this at this setting to do some other fabrics. This was scuba knit. This is an old t-shirt material. It's probably just 100% cotton of some type. What I'm going to do is put my fabric here, get my my presser foot, my blade to its highest position, lift up my presser foot, get my fabric in there, under the blade as far as possible, lower presser foot, grab my chain, give it a little bit of pressure and hold it until the stitching gets into the fabric about a centimeter or so. And there that is. Then you pull your fabric, it'll pull it over to one side. And then on the front is your ladder stitch. Now some people say that the flatlock stitch is not as strong as some of the other stitches. I'm pulling as hard as I can, and the fabric is tearing before the stitch breaks. So it's a very strong stitch. What we have now is some sport fabric. This is some polyester lycra. And you probably don't have to change the setting much between changing fabrics. Knife in its highest position. Lift up the presser foot, get my fabric in here as far as possible. Grab the chain. And I have my stitch width, which would be the density, set at about a 1. It did, on this particular fabric, not skip a stitch, but didn't quite equal out on all of them. Pull it to get it to lay flat to one side. Probably for this fabric, because it's a slippery, probably would change the differential maybe a little either tighter or looser than your chain stitch on that side. I mean your ladder stitch on this side. Now we're going to try some very lightweight knit. This is about as lightweight fabric as I work with. It's about 125 grams. It's a cotton lycra. I'm going to put it in the machine. Knife at its highest position. Lift up the presser foot. Get the fabric in there under the knife as far as possible. Now this will probably come out marginally okay, because this is substantially thinner than everything else, so might have to do a little adjusting on the settings a little bit to make it come out well. See, since I did not pull it off to the left, even on this very lightweight, it still kept me a nice square corner. And the stitching done really well on this very lightweight. It's a little hard to see. I'm going to pull the fabric open. It'll fold over to one side. This really thin fabric, it doesn't really fold over all that well, but it will fold over a little bit. Then on the other side we have the ladder stitch. A little hard to see on this fabric. Now we're going to try this on, this is a heavyweight or a bottom weight scuba knit. It's a 325 grams per square meter. We're going to use the exact same technique we did earlier, we've been doing so far. Knife in its highest position. Lift up the presser foot. Get it under the knife as far as possible. Grab your chain, give it a little bit of pull. That stitch came out because it's a little heavier of a fabric. Probably the best looking looper stitching out of all of them. Pull it open. Since this is a heavier weight fabric, you're going to have to pull it a little harder. But it folds over probably the best of all of them because it's a little more structured of a knit. That is the looper side. Then this is the ladder stitch side. Now on some machines you can get your looper side where your fabrics, instead of folding over a little bit, butt up against each other like this inside the flatlock instead of getting folded over slightly. This machine, the finishing touch, I haven't really been able to get it to do that yet. I'll still try and give it a few more shots another day. But this machine tends to like to after you do your stitching, is to fold one of them over the other like this inside of it instead of butting the raw edges together. So fold it over and then has the looper thread over the slightly folded over.